Greetings and welcome back to Sovereign Actual. This episode of Modern Game Review is all about Destiny 2. I am aware that this game was released in 2017, but due to the constant updates and DLCs that it seems Bungie is doing their best to keep this game and its universe relevant and engaging. As Season 11, the Season of Arrivals as it's called, is finally here and that boring and absolutely terrible Season of the Worthy is over, Destiny is on its way to being a good game again. The next major DLC drops in September, probably, and is slated to revamp the game in a lot of ways, with removal of places and items, the addition of new places and items, and an overhaul of the game's system. Destiny 2's Fall DLC will essentially be a new installment of the game, though it will retain the Destiny 2 title as it won't actually be a separate game. Let's move on to the game's reception. In the most generic sense of the term, reception, Destiny 2 may have had issues living up to its hype, as many didn't see it as a true sequel, even referring to it as Destiny 1.5, citing that the game felt just like the first one. And they aren't wrong. Destiny 2 came across as a Destiny clone, with some minor improvements. Across the board, scores from review sites range from 7.5 to 10 out of 10. Let's go ahead and look at a review from the tried and true GameSpot. On this website we see that they gave Destiny 2 a score of 8. 8 isn't bad. 8 isn't great. They list the pros of the game as having a greater variety of activities to make the grind less of a bore, and that teamwork is extremely rewarding. On the other side of that coin, they list the cons as having a derivative story. Again, they aren't wrong. Destiny 2's game design is elaborate to say the least. There are a lot of activities that can be done. A lot going on with the UI, and a lot going on with sounds and visuals. This game has more separate styles of PvP than any other game I've ever played, and more styles of co-op and PvE than any other game I can even think of. World design is very good, and very varied. Each planet or moon that you can travel to is semi-linear, meaning that while it has open world attributes, it's more like large rooms connected by narrow hallways, and you're a puppy running around sniffing at every corner and object. Long live Cayde 6, the beloved NPC that was voiced by Nathan Fillion, and ultimately killed off in the game's progression. Now that that's over, let's get into it. There are many characters in Destiny 2, with lore and background stories to accompany them all. They are also very professionally voiced, with very well-known names like Claudia Black and Nathan Fillion. The player's character is a nameless guardian though, with a mysterious/unknown history, and is yet somehow pivotal to the fate of all. This was undoubtedly done to make the narrative match for each player, regardless of the class they chose to play as. The game is massive enough without additional varied dialogue dependent on what each player is playing as. Character interaction isn't as expansive as you might expect though, and when compared to Fallout 3 or Fallout 4, we see that Destiny's interactions are linear, fixed, and somewhat forced. There's no option A or option B, it's do this for this outcome, and that's all there is. Most backstory for the various characters is found through the grimoire and triumphs rather than any interactive dialogue. The graphics are great. A lot of thought seems to have been put into every detail, and the textures, resolutions, and polygon counts all look good. Even the effects and weapons look good, and considering how varied the weapons are, most of which have multiple options for texturing through shaders and ornaments, and many with unique effects while firing, it's actually surprising that there's no errant seams or rendering. All of this undoubtedly attributes to the fact that the final install folder for Destiny 2 is 106 gigabytes, which just happens to be the max that consoles allow for a single game, specifically on the PlayStation 4. The audio system is also great, though not complex. From ambient sounds to gunshots to class abilities and supers, the sounds are impressive while not being overbearing or understated. The real audio magic, in my opinion, is through the voice acting. All of it is professionally done, and is done rather extensively. Some characters talk more than others, some only seem to talk in cinematics, with the odd repeating lines they say while you walk past them at the tower. Now, I play this game on Xbox One, and I can say that the controls are solid. Everything is efficient, which is good as the game is fast paced and you can't always be thinking about what button to press next. I imagine it's much the same on the DualShock PlayStation controllers, though I consider personally that the Xbox controller to be the best design. For PC, it's probably a bit more of a challenge with the controls, but I hear there's less recoil on PC, so perhaps it's better yet. When we get into difficulty, I'd like to break it down into general difficulty and boss difficulty. For general difficulty, through the entirety of the game, you'll encounter a wide variety of enemies. The Hive, the Fallen, the Cabal, the Scorn, the Vex, and the Taken. The Taken is essentially all the others combined. There's a decent variety of enemies here, though some seem to be retextures of originals, such as the Scorn, which are basically the Fallen with slightly different models and classes. Very slightly. A lot of the enemies are simple rank and file types that suffice more as cannon fodder than as a true challenge, but they work as they will cause you to be low on ammo or reloading when more challenging opponents come at you. There are also certain enemies that are damn near invincible unless you have the proper weapon mods installed on your chosen firearm, such as barrier champions or overload champions. Enemies don't pose the only danger though, and as like most games, fall damage will obliterate you. There are also the occasional traps, hallways lined with trip mines being a prime example, though they really only occur during missions and strikes, and not at all in the open world exploration parts of the map. When it comes to the boss difficulty, there are two main types of bosses in Destiny 2. The bosses that you find at the end of missions or strikes, and the bosses you find during a raid. Strike bosses are basic bosses from the campaign, and while they are a challenge, they are not even impossible to beat during your first encounter. Raid bosses are different, and they are generally multiple bosses per raid. The real challenge here is that the bosses need to be defeated in very particular ways. Puzzles need to be solved and certain challenges completed in order to activate a boss's damage phase, and the common enemies in raids are also nearly constant trouble and fairly dangerous. Destiny's lore is far larger than many people realize, partially because it is told through visuals more than through spoken dialogue. It's also everywhere you look, from character backgrounds to the designs of the Earth ruins to the triumphs and achievements, many of which come with a paragraph, or several, of story to fill in blanks. In truth, the lore of Destiny 2 is far too expansive and spread out to cover here. Everything has lore. Guns have their own lore, characters have theirs, locations and enemies have their own, and the Guardian has their own, though it is shrouded in mystery. The story of Destiny 2 is basically a continuation of the first Destiny, though with a different player character. It's the battle against darkness, using light as a tangible weapon to help the other Guardians defend the last city on Earth and to defend the Traveler, a mysterious orb that floats over the last city and provides the Guardians with their light. The story here expands and changes with every season and DLC, making it a very dynamic story, if not a story that gets harder to follow. The story may not seem horribly original, but it is well executed and entertaining to play through. When it comes to multiplayer, Destiny 2 has co-op and PvP, like most games. The biggest difference though is that it's designed with similar ideals to an MMO, and while it's nowhere near as massive, everything can be done with friends. or strangers, with the exclusion of a handful of story missions that force single player. Everything listed here can be done either single player or with others: the campaign, strikes, nightmare hunts, and the pit of heresy. Raids are something that can't be done solo, as they usually require a team of 6 to complete, and Gambit is more of a PvPvE game mode where teams compete to kill as many enemies and bank as many notes as possible while defending from players who invade from the opposite team. Aside from the aforementioned Gambit mode, Destiny 2 has an expansive PvP playlist, including your basic Crucible deathmatch and attrition style PvP matches, and the recently introduced Trials of Osiris, which is a hardcore PvP mode that costs in-game currency to enter. Aside from those, they also have the Iron Banner, which is basically Crucible with special rewards and challenges that come around every few weeks for the span of a week, meaning it's a timely affair. Destiny 2 gets new content via 2 methods. Method 1 being the seasons, where new content is added for free in small doses, such as special events or new missions. Method 2 is DLCs, which aren't free and come out every few seasons. The DLCs tend to include massive content releases and large amounts of game fixes and adjustments. The newest DLC, called Beyond Light, is slated to be released this fall and will be one of the largest DLCs to date, with the deluxe version costing a good $70. With this future DLC, they claim the game's mechanics will be overhauled, and that we may lose an existing planet or two along with weapons, armor, and that we'll get a new planet to explore while toting new weapons and gathering new armor. The biggest change, though, according to me, is what we'll finally get a new subclass, one with powers based in darkness. As darkness is what we've spent all previous DLCs and games combating, this may lead to revelations that change the very purpose of the game. We'll see. In summary, Destiny 2 is a good game, and it's a flawed game. Season of the Worthy, which ended on June 8th, was terrible, and a considerable portion of the game's player base was put off by it, myself included. It was boring. The newest season, which is Season of the Arrivals, adds promise, but even it's toned back with just enough to get players excited for the fall DLC, and that's where this review comes into play. I absolutely think that Destiny 2 is worth playing or coming back to, if you wait until September. Right now, it might not be enough to keep a player invested, but if the hype surrounding the fall DLC Beyond Light is true, then Destiny 2 will reach new heights and be massively improved for existing and new players. If the DLC is good as is expected, then Destiny 2 could easily be scored with a solid 9 of 10. As it is at this particular date, I'd say it's between a 7 and 8 out of 10. Thank you all for stopping by and hanging out. I truly appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I've decided to tone down my video output, alternating the Revisiting the Classics series and the Modern Game Review series every week, at least while I deal with a hectic personal and work life. Next week's video will be something older, something where your choices impact the game world and story, and it is in a fantasy setting. Again, thank you for watching, and come back anytime.